Hello guys, this is Chetanvmehta from Skillcubator. I welcome you all. And in today's session, we'll talk about a burn down chart, a daily burn down chart. Now, many of you have asked me the same question on YouTube, via emails, that you want to know about a burn down chart. What exactly is a burn down chart? Why do we need one? How to create one and how to interpret a burn down chart. So I thought of creating a short video on that. So let's discuss that today. Now, you must be familiar with this framework, Scrum framework. If you see here, we see the burn down, burn up charts. Now, there's another term and similar artifact called burn up charts, but today in this session, we'll only talk about a burn down charts. Now, a burn down chart is one artifact which tells us how much work is remaining in the sprint. Now, this burn down chart is created and owned by the entire sprint team. It's not one person who is owning it. It's owned collectively by the whole sprint team. However, the Scrum Master will be that one person who will be tracking this document very closely on a day-to-day basis and typically in a daily stand-up meeting. So he or she will be taking a look at this artifact because this document tells the team how much work is still remaining to be done by the end of the sprint. So let's assume that we have a 2-week sprint. I can tell by looking at this chart that how much work is still remaining, how much work we still need to burn in order to finish the scope of the sprint. The burn down chart is basically a simple chart. Now, to explain the concept and to demonstrate the burn down chart, I will just switch back to Excel where I've created some test data and I've created some burn down charts. But in today's environment, you would be using some tools wherein the tool will create the burn down chart for you. You just have to plug in the hours and the tool will be creating the burn down charts. Whether it's a Jira tool or Rally or Requirements One, Doors, any of these tools will do the same thing. But today we will take a look at how to create one using Excel. The concept is same. It doesn't matter which tool you use, whether it's an Excel or a plain piece of paper, or you use any of these tools like Jira or Rally, Doors, Requirements One, any of these tools. So let me switch back to Excel. Now, as you can see here, this is my data which we will be using in order to create the sprint burn down chart. Okay. Now my sprint duration is 10 days. In this example, I'm going with 10 days. You can have anywhere from 1 week to 2 weeks to 3 weeks to 4 weeks. So here it's a 2-week sprint. That means 10 working days. Now my team size is 7 team members. Right? I have 7 team members in my sprint team. Now here I'm just taking into consideration the core team members which would be taking part in the design, development and testing. Now you may have analysts like business analyst, scrum master, which will be outside of your sprint. When I say sprint team, that means the team who is actually part of the delivery side. That means they are doing the design, development and testing, and at the end of the sprint they need to deliver the product, right? So I have 7 people here who can be your solution architect, design folks, developers, testers, information assurance people, 508 compliance tester, all of these people. I have 7 people. Now hours per day. Here I'm saying each team member will work approximately 6 hours per day. Right? That means we get in one day we get 42 hours of work from the entire team. 6 times 7, 42 hours. And if you multiply that with 10 days, I get 420 hours worth of work in one sprint. And that's my total capacity of the sprint. Right? My total capacity is worth 420 hours, and that's coming from 6 times 7, 42 times 10, 420. So in one sprint, we can take work which is close to 420 hours. You should not take more, because you will be burning yourself and you won't be able to finish the scope. At the same time, you should not take too less, like 300 hours of work, because you will be wasting a lot of hours there. So take enough hours of work which is close to 420. Now I would go to that extent and tell you that try to keep up some buffer of 10 to 20%, because sometimes you may have some ad hoc requests coming in. There might be some technical difficulty, server is down, or sick team member, meetings, lunch breaks, those kind of things. So in a real world you would keep like 15 to 20% of buffer, but here we are going with an assumption that each team member will be giving us 6 hours of work each day. So if we have 7 people in a team, I get 420 hours in the entire sprint. 6 times 7 is 42, times 10, 420. Now let's see why we need to look at the team capacity. Now you must be clear with this concept that in a sprint you take the work from the backlog, you pull the work from the backlog, and typically you would have a user story. And when you as a developer or a tester take a look at a user story, you would start breaking it down into small subtasks. So I've just taken one example here. We have one user story which is create a login page. These are estimated hours. That means how much time it will take for each of the team members to do in hours, who has been assigned that task, subtask, and what's the role of that person. So one user story, create a login page, has been broken down into different subtasks. So I have create a prototype, which is one subtask. It will take 4 hours. Rohan has been assigned, and he's a UX person on the team. Second subtask is create an HTML page, which will again take 4 hours, will be done by Kenny, and she is a web developer. Third subtask is connect to a web service method. It will take 6 hours. Roger has been assigned, and he's a developer. Subtask 4, conduct functional testing. It will take 8 hours. Maybe it's very complicated. Michelle is the tester. Conduct 508 compliance testing. Tom has been assigned, and he is going to take 4 hours to do that. We need to scan the code, and that's going to take us 2 hours, and Kate will be the person who will be doing the code scanning. And finally we have performance testing, or integration testing, sorry, and that's going to take another 2 hours, will be done by Mohan. So total we have 7 subtasks which will be required to finish one user story, which is create login. Now if you sum all of these subtasks, it's coming to 30 hours. Now similarly you would be having other stories in your backlog which you would be pulling and breaking it down into subtasks, and you would take only those many stories which will let you do the work, which will be less than 420 hours worth of work. You should not be taking more than that, because you will be burning yourself and you won't be able to finish. You will be scrambling throughout the sprint. You don't want that. Okay, so here we are saying that one story is 30 hours. Let's suppose we have, on an average, we have story which is worth 30 points. So approximately you can take 14 stories in one sprint, right? Now you can, as I said, you can always keep some buffer of 15 to 20% to play safe. So instead of 14, you can say, we can take stories, like 12 stories or 10 stories, so that you are more confident in finishing the work. Now that's basically how you would be doing your subtasking. Right? Now let's go back to the point and see how to create a burn down chart. Now let's suppose our sprint starts on 12th of October. And I already know my team's capacity. I'm saying that in one sprint, my team is going to finish work worth 420 hours, 420 hours of work. So these are my dates, 10 working days, and that's my ideal burn rate. That means every day my team comes in to work, they burn 42 hours every day at a constant rate, and on 23rd we don't have any hours left. All the work is done and there is 0 hour left in our sprint. So you start with 42 hours on day 1. By the end of the first day, which is 12th, you have burned 42 hours. That means you still have 378 hours of work to be done. Same thing, by the end of the second day, you come here, you finish 42 hours, and then you have 336 hours left. Likewise, each day you will be burning 42 hours, and that's how on 23rd you are done with all your hours. There is nothing left. And this is known as your ideal burn rate. We are assuming that people come in and work every day towards the task which he or she has been assigned to. Now, one important point here is we are not concerned with people coming in and spending time in the office. People may be coming and sitting for 10 hours in the office. We are not concerned with that. We are concerned with how much time they have spent or burned on the subtask, and that's when you need to allocate the hour to the subtask. I may have told it's going to take me 4 hours. I come tomorrow, I sit for 10 hours, but I don't work on this subtask. I cannot claim a single minute or any second of it because I did not work on that subtask. I can only claim when I have worked on that subtask. That's an important point. Okay, so now let's go one step further and see the burn down chart data. That's my days. I start my sprint on 12th of October, finish it on 23rd, and that's basically my working days. Okay, so I did not take into account the weekends. If you see 17th and 18th are missing because those are the weekends. Now this is basically my ideal burn rate. It's not changing. It's the same data which is here. Okay. Now let's see how to plot a burn down chart. Now this is the data we are creating, and then based on this data we simply have to create a chart, and that's your burn down chart. Now here the first scenario is that we start the sprint on 12th. This is my ideal burn rate, but actually I'm burning less than I'm supposed to. I'm finishing less work than I'm supposed to. Right, so here I'm burning just about 32 hours, 34 hours, 28 hours, 20 hours, again 10 hours. I'm burning very less, 28, 24. Right, so on this day I burned only 30 hours, 34 hours. So what is happening is, if you can see that each day, instead of burning 42 hours and getting a constant slope, we are burning less than we were supposed to. So what happened is, by the end of the sprint, 23rd October, when we closed the sprint, we had work worth 140 hours to be finished, which we could not finish. Now, you all know that sprint is time boxed. You cannot extend the day just because you have some work remaining. So what will happen is, now that story, the user story which you could not finish, now will go back into the backlog, and it's not going to look good, especially the product owner as well as the team itself, because you were not able to meet the scope of the sprint. Right? So this is one case where you are unable to meet the scope of the sprint and you are unable to finish all the work which you plan to do. Not a good scenario. Now let's see when everything works as per the plan and you are able to meet the sprint date. So here these figures are not changing. This data is not changing. It's exactly same. It's an ideal burn rate, wherein every day you are supposed to burn 42 hours against all the subtasks which the term identified here. Now here what is happening is, we are burning roughly around 42. So on first day we burned 40 hours, second day we burned 38 hours, 30 hours, 34, 36, 40, 40, 38, 30, 52. Right? So on 23rd, we don't have any hours left. So there is no work remaining and we are able to close the sprint successfully. Right? So even though my ideal burn rate is different, but roughly when we average it out, we were able to finish all the subtasks and all the hours were burnt by this date. That's 0. We don't have anything left. And let's take a very optimistic scenario where we were able to finish the sprint 2 days before the sprint closure date. So here we are saying that we are burning more, burning 50 hours on the first day, 48 hours, 60 hours, 50 hours, 48 hours. Right? So we are burning more. Instead of 42 hours, which is our ideal burn rate, we are burning more. And as you see here, on 21st itself, we were able to finish the sprint 2 days before the actual sprint completion date. And the reason is, we were able to claim more hours every day, We were able to burn more hours against all the subtasks. So by this date, there is nothing left. We've burnt all the hours. There are no subtasks to be finished, and we are done with the sprint. That's a very optimistic scenario, but it does happen sometimes. So we have three different scenarios, right? One is where we lagged behind, we couldn't finish the sprint scope, we have some hours remaining. Second scenario, where we met the target by the end of the sprint. And the third scenario is where we were ahead of schedule and we were able to close the sprint 2 days before the actual completion date, right? So now let's take a look at the burn down charts, how they look like. So the first scenario is where we couldn't meet the scope. So the blue line indicates your constant burn rate, your ideal burn rate, where every day you come and you finish 42 hours of work, worth of work. So you can finish all the hours by 23rd. That's your ideal burn rate. But in the first scenario, we said that we were lagging behind. We were unable to meet the target. We were unable to meet the sprint scope. And you can see here, the gap is widening. This is my actual burn rate. I'm burning less because this tells us the amount of hours we have, right? The amount of hours remaining. And your horizontal axis tells us the day. Okay, so the x-axis tells us the days or the dates, and the y tells us the number of hours remaining in the sprint. So if you see here, this gap is widening as the dates moves on, right? Each day the gap is widening. So here we are okay, but as we come here on 15th, the gap is more. That's a red flag to the team, to the Scrum Master, that something is wrong and we are missing something here. We need to take a corrective action, right? You don't want to wait until this time because it's too late to do anything, right? So every day in the daily stand-up meeting, your team, especially the Scrum Master, will be taking a look at the burn down charts. He or she will be monitoring very closely what's the burn down rate, what's your actual burn down rate versus the ideal burn down rate. And if there is a gap, they would like to know why you are unable to finish the tasks on a day-to-day basis. So if you see here, on 23rd, we were left with 140 hours of worth of work remaining. And because it's a time box environment where you cannot extend the sprint date, you cannot finish that story. That story will go back into the backlog. And imagine it's a waste of time because you already worked on it. Now it's again going to the backlog. And we don't know whether it's going to be picked up again or whether there's a new requirements to it or the code you wrote has to be refactored. I mean, there will be some extra overheads when that happens. So try to avoid a scenario where you have to move the story back into the backlog. Take only that much work you can finish in that sprint. But in reality, that happens where for some reason you have to take out the work from the backlog, from the sprint scope, sprint backlog, and put it back into the product backlog just because something happened which was not expected, and those things are inevitable, right? So that's one scenario. Now the second scenario is the best case scenario where your ideal burn rate, which is a blue line, is going hand in hand with your actual burn down rate. So every day you are kind of burning roughly 42 hours. That means the team is coming and they are working towards all the subtasks, and those subtasks are equivalent to 42 hours worth of work. So if you see here, by 23rd, we are done with all the work. There is 0 hour worth of work remaining. Right? That's a best case scenario. That means whatever work you took as part of your sprint, you were able to finish all the work successfully. You designed, developed, and tested, and there is no work remaining for that sprint. That's a best case scenario. Now let's take this case where we are saying that my actual burn down rate was higher than the ideal burn down rate. My ideal burn down rate is again my blue line, which is falling at a constant rate, 42 hours, and I was supposed to finish my sprint on 23rd. By 23rd, I should have burnt all my hours against all the subtasks. But because the team was so productive, highly efficient and effective, they were able to burn more hours every day. The third scenario I said, right? And then by the end of 21st itself, we are able to finish the sprint 2 days ahead. We were supposed to finish on 23rd, but we are done on 21st itself. So we saved 2 days of sprint, but yet we delivered all the stories because we were able to finish all the subtasks under those stories. Right? That's very rare and very highly optimistic scenario, but sometimes you can see this kind of scenario happening. So what I did was I just plugged those hours and created a chart, and that's what the tool will give you, and that's your burn down charts. Right? Again, this is a case where I couldn't meet my scope and I was left with some hours which I couldn't finish. The second scenario is my ideal scenario where I was able to finish all the subtasks and I don't have any hours worth of work by the end of the sprint. And this is my very optimistic scenario where because of my team's productivity and efficiency, they were able to finish the sprint 2 days ahead. And on 21st itself, all the subtasks are done and there are 0 hours worth of work remaining for that sprint. Now, this is based on Excel. Now, the tool doesn't matter. The logic and the concept is same. Whether I'm using Excel, I'm using a whiteboard, or I'm using any of these tools like Jira, Rally, the concept is still the same. Now, if you are using any of these tools, all you have to do is you need to log your hours on a day-to-day basis, and the tool will create a burn down chart for you. So you don't have to create manually. The tool will create it for you. You just have to make sure that the team is logging their hours against all the subtasks on a day-to-day basis. So guys, that's all for this session. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll create some more sessions on burn down chart using a tool called Jira so that you can see in real world how people use it and how the tool creates a burn down chart. But it's the same concept as I said. It doesn't matter whether it's an Excel or a tool, the concept is still the same. So thanks, and I'll see you again soon. So do call us back on 703-200-9921. Our email ID is info@skillcubator.com. Website is www.skillcubator.com. Thanks once again. My name is Chetan Mehta, and I'll see you again. Bye.